you're just, I think, even 10 days, 11 days, winner. Not only you, but you're the winner of the Management Book of the Year 2026. I thought it was 2025, but no, it's the Management Book of 2026. The year is not even started and already announced the Management Book of the Year about the subject, which is, for me, highly relevant. And for many other women, I read 2 million in the Netherlands and Belgium. Congratulations, firstly, with that.
Yes, thank you very much. Yes, it was, us at least, it was a complete surprise. But also very happy, of course, that the jury chose for, as we call it, Silenteeism. But a real English translation we don't have yet.
I googled it. Silent omission, or
yes, yeah. We combine silent absenteeism, and then it becomes silenteeism. We want to have a little bit of words specifically different from absenteeism. Absenteeism often caused by disease.
Yes.
And silenteeism often caused by not talking about it, silence. And the big advantage is that absenteeism is normally the role of the doctor, while now with the word silenteeism, we also give a role to the managers. And silenteeism is the part of the absenteeism that can be avoided.
Yeah, it's a very interesting topic to win the prize. And you started writing the book about there was not really a big interest in publishing the book because there was no market for it. And here, tada, you win the Management Book of the Year. How is that then for you?
Yeah, of course, it's of course tremendously nice, but it's especially nice that the topic now gets the visibility that it needs to get. And I also understand that publishers, when they publish books, they of course look at the market in which they are going to play. So, for example, if you say I have an Italian cookbook, then they are very interested because the Italian cookbook market is a huge market. And if you look at management books for menopause, there is no market for it because the market is inexisting because nobody has ever written on the topic. Not even in the UK, where the menopause topic is at least 10 years ahead of the European market, but also not even in any other country, at least not findable through Google or ChatGPT. And in the UK, I checked some references of people that know. I can almost for certain say that this is the first management book written on the topic of menopause.
And why has the book been selected as the winner?
Yeah. The jury was. Let me first say that it's already very nice that in the Netherlands there exists a prize like Management Book of the Year, and it's not only for the Netherlands, it's also for the Flemish part in Belgium, of course, the Dutch language. It's an independent jury, and that's already nice, because most of the times prizes go to the most sold book, and then they win twice, and they win the visibility, and they already sold most. But this is an independent jury consisting of 6 members and one head of the jury. The principle was very fair. They read 250 management books, a little bit more. And when not everybody reads, but when 2 people find one book good enough, then they propose it to the next 2 people. And when they find it good enough, then all 6 have read the book. And so you end up on a long list of 52 books. Then they make out of that long list a short list, and then also a winner. Why they chose the book? It's a very good question, and I asked it to them also. And for them, first of all, it's because it's new. There is sometimes a little bit of criticism on management books that they are copies of books that are known from the English American, so that they are based on other books. This one is in fact new. Nobody has ever written on this topic before. And what we also focus a lot on is that we are not only giving tips and hints, but we also explain how and what's happening. A lot of people that read it say, "Oh, I didn't even knew that was going to happen." And suddenly I recognize myself in it. And that's a very important aspect, of course, that people start to see new things that have always been there, but have always been invisible. And that's also leading to the title, of course, of the book.
And if you say people, then you mean women, or you mean also the managers, or who do you refer to?
Yeah, I have to say that most of the time it's women that react and give feedback. The men that react, they react in such a positive way that they even have more questions on the topic. The book is written for leaders, but also HR and policymakers. And of course, in human resources, you see a lot of women. It will be probably also read a little bit more by women, but it's written for everybody. Many people ask me that question, a man that writes about women's problems, a man that writes about menopause. To those people, I say, that's because you see it as a women's problem, menopause. I see it as an organizational issue, so I can tackle it also as a man. It doesn't matter. As long as we see menopause as a women's problem, people will ask me that question.
I must admit, I have the same question going through my head as well, because menopause is impacting only women. So it feels also something for women only. I understand your rationale about, okay, but what's happening in the body has an effect on what's happening in the company, in the performance, in the leadership. So that goes beyond the person. I understand that, but it remains still a little bit also with the silence is also a part of it, that women don't want to talk themselves too much about it if they already understand that some of the things which are happening with them are caused by the change in hormones.
Yeah, and that's of course the very first point that you mentioned. When do women realize that it's the change of hormones that is affecting them? The diagnosis is often made a little bit too late when we talk menopause.
Is it then also the intention of your book to increase the awareness and that recognition comes at an earlier stage? That would already save a lot of issues, I think.
Yeah. If a woman is aware of menopause symptoms as from the age of 35, and now people will say, oh, well, it's too early. But we should not say that it's too early. It's being aware of the possible symptoms that menopause can bring. If you train people or make people aware as from the age of 35, then at least they know that at the age of 42, when their body starts to change or they feel sometimes something happening, then at least they know it's perhaps menopause. Perhaps I should talk to somebody. If we are able to take or break around the taboo of menopause, then indeed the diagnosis comes earlier. And we see also that when women know how to diagnose their symptoms, and as soon as the diagnosis is made, the severeness of the symptoms at work is less big, because they know it's not me, I'm not getting crazy, I'm just in menopause. And that's already a very comforting thought that eases certain symptoms, especially also in the work situation.
Yeah, I investigated a little bit in the topic myself, and the symptoms of anxiety, stress, burnout, menopause, there are sleeping disorders. They're all sort of the same. So how do you identify what is what?
Yes, that's exactly why we also wrote a book. If you talk about personal life, you see also in the researches that are done in the daily life practice, what is the symptom of menopause that people suffer the most from? Then there are certain studies in the Netherlands that say it's sex because of vaginal dryness or lowered libido. And the second is, of course, the hot flushes. And those are let's say hot flushes is the most typical symptom for menopause. And sex is perhaps the biggest issue in daily life. But at work, those two symptoms, they play much, much, much less. In somewhere in the book on page 57, I have the book in front of me. We also highlight what are the symptoms that women say that they affect their work. And then it's very easy. It's tiredness. It's not being able to sleep. It's loss of concentration. It's loss of memory, anxiety feelings. And when somebody presents herself with those symptoms towards the manager, the first thing that the manager will think of is indeed, I'm facing somebody that's close to a burnout, because all those symptoms are exactly related to burnout. Even sweating, if you have a burnout, can also be a symptom. So even the hot flushes can sometimes be misunderstood. Although if a woman has hot flushes, she knows that she has hot flushes. Yes, it's important to be aware that the symptoms of menopause are very, very similar to the symptoms of burnout. And therefore, in the Netherlands, they have now also new guidelines for the occupational physicians in the companies, the company doctors, as we would say it. And those have been published last month in March, after also some studies that illustrated that the doctors don't really know menopause that well, and probably also misdiagnose stress for menopause or vice versa.
Yeah, that's another thing. You have the symptoms, and then you're adding up stress because you don't know what exactly is going on. So it's a circle which then never ends.
But due to hormones, you can also have the feelings of anxiety. Eh? The lowerness in hormones also offers you those feelings.
I remember myself, and I didn't make the connection only years later. So can you imagine? I was flying a lot for my work, and then one day I came back from holiday, and I stepped into the plane, and as soon as they say, "Okay, gates all closed," no, I wanted to get out of the plane. I could not stay. I didn't want to stay, but I thought, okay, come on. I've done it so many times. I need to manage. What is the problem now? It was 3-hour flight, so it was also long still. I was digging really deep. I did all my breathing techniques and calming down for 3 hours to really be relaxed, but I needed to be super focused on that for 3 hours to at least to be able to sit, to think nothing will happening. I really an anxiety attack tremendously. So after I went even to the doctor to say, I don't know what happened, because I feel so weird. It came out of the blue. And then they gave me something like, they said, no, maybe you need to take benzodiazepines, no, to calm down.
Yes.
I said, no, I don't want to take that. If you tell me that I'm physically all is good, then I need to work this out. And I don't know, the next day everything was normal again without doing anything. But then only when I started to read and inform myself more about menopause, I thought maybe that episode could have been something to do with a huge shift in hormones, because this anxiety, it was so not, I didn't recognize nothing. I didn't recognize myself. I didn't recognize my reaction. I didn't recognize the panic. And then I read more about it, menopause, and I thought, it must have been then that.
It's a very common symptom of menopause, anxiety. Yes. For example, driving the car and having a sudden fear of changing lanes. That's a very common. The more women you speak, the more you hear these symptoms. Yes, and in fact, every woman can also place it like it's a sudden irrational anxiety that they feel because they have done it before. They have walked those stairs, they have been skiing off black slopes before, and they know the technique very well, so they can. But suddenly there's a certain feeling of anxiety driving the car, and of course sometimes at work, presentations can also happen.
Yeah, quite impressive. I was also very impressive about, you start the book with numbers. I think that's could be one of the reasons also why the book has been selected, because it shows the impact of it. I started to say, okay, I think it's also very female thing, but it has an impact on work, it has an impact on productivity, it has an impact on innovation, collaboration, many things. And you see also, if I remember well, it was 1% of the women who step out of functions because it's just not for them anymore. So you lose also a lot of high talented managers in that period.
Yeah, indeed. If you're convinced that women can be high-level managers, because that's a very important aspect of the book also, your support is not damage control, but really an empowerment. That's very important in the last W of the book. But indeed, in the beginning of the book, we really focus on the financial aspect. As it's a management book, I also thought it's really important if we talk about people. Yes, of course, everybody understands and we have to support. But if we talk about money, then sometimes the bells ring a little bit harder, and therefore there is also quite some studies being published on the impact of menopause on the financial level. So you also see that there is quite some literature on it, and that's then also the reason why we thought it's needed to write this book, because you have a lot of literature on the financial impact, on the impact on women, on the impact on teams, on the very broad impact. But there's very little studies done on what is the efficacy of policies. what is the efficacy of the workshops that we give? What is the efficacy of the inclusive assets that we do for example, making sure that the women have adapted clothes or that they have an air conditioning? What is the impact of all these policy measurements that we can make? There's little research, but there's a lot of research on the financial impact.
All these measures, special for women, me personally, makes me then also a little bit uncomfortable. Like, I don't want to be put on the spotlight. I don't want to have all these attentions. I just try to cope with it. But that's probably exactly the thing which you want to avoid.
Yes.
I think the taboo is also there.
The taboo is there, and at the same time, and that's the difficulty with menopause, of course, the more focus on menopause, the more it can also be stigmatizing.
Yes.
And you don't want to stigmatize women, and you don't want to stigmatize, especially because not all the women have those menopause problems. It's let's say 20% doesn't have the issues, and 20% has severe issues.
Yeah.
And then there is a big middle of 60% that is perhaps able to cope with it, perhaps not. That's then the big question. But we know that many women have the issues, that it impacts, especially the presenteeism, being at work but not so productive, and you lose productivity. It's difficult to measure. And on top of it, is it not stigmatizing? And we also discussed the stigmatizing aspect in the book. If you keep it silent, the taboo will remain and the issues will remain. If you talk too much about it, then it might become stigmatizing. So the answer is that if we integrate menopause in bigger human resources topics, like inclusion, like empathy trainings, that you also have sometimes a case of a woman with menopause, so that you break the taboo, then it becomes, of course, less stigmatizing. But yeah, sometimes that's a discussion we also have had during those 2 years that we were writing the book. And of course, not writing on it can also have the opposite effect, that it remains taboo and that women have to keep on continuing. So the answer is in putting it into the correct human resources topics that we also discuss.
You talk very often, you give us workshop, and it's all about the topics of taboos.
Yes, I talk around taboos now almost for 4 years. And then I especially talk about taboos around the hidden conditions that people have. And that can be from loss of urinary incontinence to having an ostomy or having even mental issues that you try to hide. But it's the same, and that's sometimes a comparison that I make with people that have debts, financial debt. It always starts very tiny with a couple of euros, and you keep it silent because of shame, and you only start talking it when the problem is too big and you need to find a solution because you cannot solve it yourself anymore. And that's in fact exactly the topic of silenteeism. If you wait until the diagnosis is so big, but the issue is and the solution is also big, then it's too late. You need to talk it earlier. You see that with diseases, and we call that in medical terms, time to treatment becomes longer as the taboo on the condition is bigger. Menopause at work is also a little bit like this. If you keep it too long silent, then perhaps you will need those antidepressants, those benzodiazepine that you mentioned, while in fact it was perhaps a little bit of estrogen that you needed at the age of 42.
And what is the win for companies if they spend more time, or if they really integrate governance or a framework around menopause in the office?
Yeah. Let me first start by saying it's of course around absenteeism and keeping talent within the company. And as you say, the framework is really important. Why is that so important, that framework? Because women can, first of all, indeed take some self-learnings and self-discipline to learn more around menopause and at an earlier stage. And you can indeed question, is it something that the employer has to do to train all women on menopause or not? Or is it not education or the government or whatever? But of course, the employer has the most benefit of it. So it cannot harm to inform a little bit more around menopause, or to at least break this taboo around menopause. So every manager that listens to this podcast can say at work, I listened to a very interesting podcast. Then secondly, that we see that women that face issues with menopause, they want support. They want support during that period, the perimenopause, and they want support, for example, from different people at work. but they want most of all the support of their manager. And that's where sometimes the issue sits. That manager doesn't know how to react. He doesn't know what menopause exactly is, and so the conversation is very short, and he then says something like, it's not an issue, talk to somebody else, I don't know anything of it. Or sometimes they even hear it's a hype. So as soon as you give this kind of feedback, you make the taboo for the women even bigger. And the chance that she puts it a second or a third time on your agenda is very small. Also, even if you have a good conversation and you make some agreements, but very often you don't follow up on the agreements of the meeting. And if you do that, then also for the topics of menopause or taboo topics, then it's of course much more difficult to put it on the agenda. Then the framework that you mentioned, and that's where I'm coming to. If a manager wants to make an exception for one of his team members, like for example, Sylvia, I understand you, and let's agree that on the days that you feel difficult, that you only arrive at 10 at work, for example. And so I give you the flexibility. Then, of course, what happens is other team members will say, hey, why is she allowed to start at 10 and we all have to be there at 9? Then you are treating people unequally to get them equal, but that's not what the people will feel and see. And therefore, it's important to also have some framework, because a manager that wants to make an exception for one person, it's much easier to do so if there is a framework offered by the employer, by written somewhere, that in certain cases flexible hours can be granted. And you don't have to say that's for menopause, because that's the difficulty. It's private. Menopause sits in part of the private life, while a manager is not supposed to ask about private life or mention to the rest of the company that she's in menopause, so she can start at 10. So that's also not allowed. So therefore, that framework is indeed important. Having that framework, having the managers trained, and getting people more aware of the symptoms, that will, of course, then lower absenteeism. And 20% of the women are really considering to work less, to change jobs to a less challenging job, or even to quit that job. And that's, of course, a huge number.
Yeah, you write also in the book about how many women we're talking, because it is the half of the population. Women more and more are working, also longer. Everybody will be influenced by senior female leaders also undergoing this transition. I don't remember exactly the numbers, but maybe you have them, and you make a calculation only for the Netherlands and for Belgium.
Yeah.
And those are two tiny countries, so imagine the impact on a European level.
Yeah, it's huge. Yes. In Belgium and the Netherlands, we talk about around more than 2 million women within the age of menopause and facing symptoms of menopause. The participation of women in the labor force has been increasing in the last couple of years. And of course, we know that, but what we sometimes underestimate is that above the age of 45, the ages of 55 to 65, those have been doubled in the last 20 years by the number of women working in that age group. So suddenly we don't have more menopause than, let's say, 20 years ago. We just have more women in the menopause age, in the perimenopause age, in the workplace, and even twice as much as 20 years ago. And of course, that's the reason why we talk now more about menopause, because it's an issue not only in the private life. We were able to deal with it in the private life if the woman was at home. But now if it's at work, we also face that issue.
And the win for the company, what is that?
The win for the company is, of course, if you look at absenteeism, that's a huge aspect. That 25% of the absenteeism during the age of 40 to 55 is linked to menopause. 1 out of 6 of the burnouts is also linked to menopause. But the real big advantage is that if you do the support correctly, is that you keep women within your company, and women of the age of, let's say, 45 to 67, until the age that they want us to work, 72 soon. But that's also the age that those women have, according to Zenger and Volkmann, have huge leadership qualities, much bigger than men at that age. And if you then not support women during, for example, menopause or any other transition in life, then you lose a tremendous amount of leadership qualities. So it's not only about absenteeism, it's not only about the stress in the team when somebody falls out on a longer term, but it's also keeping crucial and very high leadership qualities within the company.
I read, and it was not only in your book, but I read it more often. I need to discover that the woman, the postmenopausal woman, that is really like, I've read it, they put a crown on her head. No, she's really feeling good. She is confident. She has this empathy skills, leadership skills, everything. You went through the period of change. Almost you could see it as, I don't know, I wanted to say leveling up. I don't know what the word is.
That's what I also, you already went to next level. If you're postmenopausal, you're next level.
Next level.
That's also the empowerment that women would need. That's why I don't like to mention support during menopause, but I would rather talk about empowerment. If you have a young manager, then you also support him with some kind of training and leadership training and leadership skills training and etc. So we never call that support. We always call that training and empowerment. And we should see support in menopause also in the same way. So we know that there is a huge potential in the end that is going to be developed. And if we really have to go to work until the age of 72, in the Denmark it's already 70, and the Dutch government is discussing 72, and the Belgian government is also discussing the 72. Then of course we will have and we will enjoy a lot of leadership qualities that women bring to the workplace. And also don't underestimate, in fact, all those researches that have been done on leadership qualities, they indeed see that women at an older age have more leadership qualities, especially also on the sustainable level. But also those researchers, they only go to the age of 60, 65, never until the age of 72. So we don't know yet how bad men are at the age of 70 versus women. So that's something still to discover.
When I was reading the book and thinking about also the stigma of the word menopause, because you mention also in the book about puberty, for example. Then also you have hormonal changes, there's a lot of things happening. Really, your brain opens up. That is accepted. Boys and girls, they all go through the same transition. This is a transition only, especially for women, and then it still remains this sort of like, what's from me, what's from you, where should I talk, where should I not talk? So it remains this.
Yeah, but Sylvia, that's why we wrote the book.
Yeah. I'm also...
It's a reverse puberty, but only for women. Yeah. And everybody indeed accepts around puberty because you remember that time of your life, and you accept that the hormonal changes that happen in a room somewhere in your house. But let's be fair. Indeed, it's because it only happens to women that it's more taboo than puberty. That's not only the case with menopause. It's the same with endometriosis. It's the same with PMS. It's the same with so many, let's say, hidden female women's diseases. You see that if you work a lot around stress, but you also see that women with mental or stress issues easier go to the doctor than men, even twice as easy. So for men, it's also very often taboo, and also the physical problems that they sometimes face with erectile dysfunction, for example. But it's of course at a later stage like that happens. It doesn't happen in the middle of your career for men. At the age of 40, you're in fact at a very high level in your career, and you can make a couple of jumps to become at the highest level in your career. And if then menopause happens or the perimenopause symptoms appear, then it can sometimes be very harsh for women.
You know already from the research, but also from what's happening in reality, the investigations were mainly done on men in the past, and it's now now is sort of accelerating. But also women going through pregnancies, starting times later in the career. There's a lot of hurdles to build up your career and to really make it happen. And then you have a good accelerated speed. And then menopause is kicking in.
Yes, but that's where I believe that at work, employers can do more to make people sooner aware of those issues so that we can make those issues smaller. The problem of menopause is also a problem of not talking around it. I think we can easily manage it if we give good access to therapy at the right time, lower the taboo on menopause at work, but also, for example, on let's say certain therapies within menopause on which there is also a big taboo, and that's the reason why I believe that on this level we can still manage and improve much.
It is one of the positive things in the book you write about, which is that not only, okay, we need to address the symptoms, there needs to be awareness, but also creating this inclusion, feeling supported. When you feel supported and listened to, you dare to open up more, you dare to bring it your whole self to the office with this mutual trust, this transparency, which is created, will in the end also create better results.
Yes, indeed. That's in fact the part where inclusion and equality comes in, and you also see that gender diversity is also a topic in the book. The more equal or the more balanced genders in the office, the less absenteeism you see, and
more creativity and more innovation,
and more innovation, all those things. Yes,
all
yes.
those things. Yes.
We focus, of course, a little bit on the absenteeism level in the book, but indeed, yes, all those things play a very important role. We also know that the more we know around those symptoms, the better we can deal with them.
Yeah.
And that's a very important aspect also. So if we talk productivity, we already see an increase in productivity as soon as the woman knows that the symptoms are linked with menopause. If you know the cost, the stress is, of course, much less. Otherwise, you think that you're the one that is going crazy, or it's perhaps age, or it's perhaps because you cannot deal with the job.
No, it's true. It's true. Once you know what's going on, you feel more relaxed because you know that is then happening, that is normal, and you need to find ways to deal with it.
Yes.
For everybody, there's different solutions. For some, it's not so impactful. Others more, very impactful, and the rest is in this messy middle. The method you describe is built up from three W's in Dutch. I could not
translate in English also.
I think the wings and the weg, the way. I was thinking maybe as a translation, and I forgot
the warmth.
And the warmth. Yes, of course. Yes.
Yeah. In English, but we taught already in that sense. So that's also why it's the 3 W's also in Dutch, but it also works in English. And indeed, that method is simply to give managers or policymakers within company the ability to easily implement something. And the most important about the 3 W's in the book is that you have to do from each W something. If, for example, you forget empathy, which is in the chapter of warmth. Then it doesn't matter so much that you say, hey, we have many women with high potential in the company. If you don't have empathy at that moment also within your strategy, then it will not work. So you have to have from each W something. So that means you have to work on knowledge, and what WIND is mainly about. You have to work on empathy, and what the warmth is about. And you have to work on the way through the mist, like we said. And you have to really believe in the potential of women and also want to build that career of the women as much as you want to build the career of anybody within your team.
You gave already workshops in companies about this topic, I understood. Yes.
Many.
I thought it's all about taboos, not specifically only this one.
Yes, no. I thought, yes. So for myself, I've been mainly doing keynotes in the last couple of years around taboos at workplace. And then I discussed the 3 M's, menopause, motherhood, and menstruation. That's a little bit the red line. And then many other taboos come in, depending also on the client's wishes. And of course, some male taboos, like the ones that I mentioned around mental issues. In workshops around Silenteeism around the book are, of course, focused on menopause. I also give those trainings to leaders within companies. One while we give those trainings with leaders, there are many men also involved. And there is always, not always, but sometimes it's so nice to see people with a certain form of resistance. Like why should I now have to know something about menopause?
Mm-hmm.
But then after 1 hour of training, sometimes trainings take 2 hours and a half, but even after 1 hour of training, those are most often the people that are most enthusiastic about it, because it is such an interesting topic. Suddenly you start understanding your wife at home, but even also just understanding the cycle, the monthly cycle of a woman with the hormones, is for men also very interesting to know how it works and why it's changing and why all the different things are happening. We don't get so often education on this topic. And do you have to take always all those things into account at the workplace? No. But as I mentioned earlier, if you let one person in your team start at 10, then you will need the understanding of the other 27 people in your team. And understanding is only created by knowing a little bit more around the topic.
You talk a lot about women topics. How did you start with talking about all these women topics?
There was no plan. It was not at the age of 18 or 21 when I started to work, 22. I worked in infant nutrition and women's health mainly, and that goes from urinary tract infections to all the pelvic floor issues that women can face. And I didn't plan that. It just came on my path. But after 20, 25 years, you realize that you have a whole view of and a very wide range of issues that women face. Every one of them is, let's say, less talked because of the taboo on it. And that's something that if we break a leg, it's a broken leg. It's not such a big issue. Everybody sees it. You can stay at home. Everybody understands that you stay at home, and it's a broken leg. Simple. And we know that men break their legs many, many more often than women. So it's not an issue that men are more absent also because of a broken leg. But when it's, for example, endometriosis or cyclic migraines or all these things, then it's suddenly much more taboo.
Yeah, and then women don't talk about it.
And women don't talk about it, and they don't talk about it, and it's perhaps very important to understand that, because also after keynotes, during keynotes, I also say, of course, you are perfectly free to keep things private. It is your right to keep things private. But you have to realize for yourself that if you keep something private because you expect negative consequences at work, then you don't keep it private because it's private. You keep it private because of the workplace that is not safe enough for you. And that's a big difference, of course.
Yeah, it's a huge difference. And I'm very positive about the approach you took in the book about exactly that, offering the support and
Yes.
feeling listened to, because it's not okay, hey, we know that you're going through this phase, but also feeling seen enough, getting this warmth to go through this phase and still deliver the work in the best way you can do in this phase.
Yes. And if you get the positive reinforcement, even when you have those challenges, we see a huge impact on the workplace. If you are the manager that has shown empathy around menopause and you have shown support at that transition period, the bonding between you and your employer is much, much bigger, of course. So if you were able to break that taboo, and that's why I sometimes talk about the taboo advantage, if you as a manager can break through it and you can bond with your direct report, then it's a relationship that goes much better for the future, and perhaps the person will never leave the company because of lack of support.
Do you see a difference between female managers, female leaders, and male managers and male leaders supporting this period?
Yes, there is a difference. The big advantage of men is, for example, at menopause, that they will never be able to experience what it is themselves. So the only thing that they can do is listen. Sometimes women have the intention to say, I've lived it also, and I've done this and this and this, and that's how I solved it. So you can also solve it.
Yeah.
That's an issue that also happens already much earlier in the women's life. And it's not with a bad intention. Don't get me wrong. But for example, do you have a daughter? I have never asked. Do you have?
No.
But imagine that you have a daughter and she comes to you with menstrual pain and she says, "Oh, mom, I'm always having a pain." Very often moms with the best intentions say, "I just take a painkiller, go through it. I had them too. I persisted." But you don't feel what your daughter is feeling. And in fact, you placed her symptoms already at that moment as abnormal, perhaps. And as soon as something deviates from the norm, it becomes taboo. So you pushed it already a little bit more to the taboo side, even with the best intentions. And that's something that as a man, we can't do. And that's the advantage that men have. Now, of course, the advantage that women have is that they have more empathic skills. And if they don't reflect it on their own, if they listen, of course, and they have some of their own experience, that the conversation is, of course, easier towards a warm conversation. Now, at the workplace, it should not matter too much because men can also support. And we should not forget that as a manager, you are there to make life easier for your employees and vice versa. Also, I will also have to say that. Yes, there is a difference, and that's something that is also written in literature with higher up managers. So you also have women in leadership roles, and sometimes indeed literature also demonstrates that women in higher up leadership roles have adapted to their environment, which is very often in a male environment, and they have then sometimes less empathy towards typical women's symptoms or typical women's issues. That's something that's also written in the literature. Let me say something even more funny.
I'm ready for it.
Do you know the first daughter effect?
No.
Okay, good.
I'm a first daughter.
You're a first daughter? Oh, okay, good. Okay, good. So, in research, or for example, in the US, they ranked all the companies according to the SDGs, the Sustainable Development Goals, and they see, for example, that if you rank the companies as such, that companies with a female CEO, they score best. We know that women have also the sustainable skills, the leadership skills, to focus more on the sustainable development. But after women, which is then a small group of CEOs, come the men. And the first men are the ones that have as a first child a daughter. So the CEOs with a first child a daughter, they show more also skills towards sustainable development and also empathy in those researches. And the first daughter effect has been researched in several studies already.
Interesting. I was not aware of it. And if a manager is listening to it, or somebody from a company, what can they do? What can they do tomorrow to get started?
I would say just first hone your knowledge on menopause, because it's a very interesting period and there are so many things happening, and it's so interesting just to understand hormones, and also for yourself. Also, men have estrogen and testosterone, and so we also have those, and let's not underestimate also testosterone lowering in men is also an issue, but it doesn't happen at the age of 40. It happens a little bit later in life, so it has a less bigger impact on your career. And then I would certainly, if you have a little bit of more knowledge around menopause, then hone your skills in active listening. It is such an important aspect around management. And I know I've been manager also from big teams. You never have the time. It's never your focus. There is always stress. There are 10 emails arriving in 5 minutes, and the next meeting you're already 5 minutes late, and then suddenly somebody wants to talk menopause. No, it doesn't fit in your agenda. But if that happens, then the book also points out, then just say to the women, I see, for example, you're frustrated and this frustrates you, and it's very important, and you have a well-being duty as an employer. And so you have to ask a question around well-being at work. So it's your task as a manager to do so. But then you clearly have to book it also into your agenda that you have a well-being conversation with your manager. And then it has to be a conversation that you don't get disturbed with phone calls and emails and knocking on the door. And that's an active listening of, let's say, half an hour, 1 hour. And if you make agreements during that discussion, follow up on those agreements. That's very, very important that you follow up on those agreements. And if you find difficulties yourself to make agreements or to find solutions, then of course there is a doctor in every company. You have this obligation as a company, and they are also now being trained more and more to help out on these issues also. So there is help within the company, but the thing that most women want is just your support, your understanding and your support. If you realize that you have such a big impact as a manager, then you will also realize that it's a small effort to book the time in your agenda also.
Yeah, everybody wants to have healthy employees, healthy managers in the company, but then finding the time for it to really provide also
I would even say menopause is not unhealthy. It's not a disease, menopause. Everybody is going through it. It's not unhealthy. It's somebody that wants to have support. She can deal with many of those symptoms. She will deal with many of those symptoms, but she just needs a little bit of your support. And that's why I say it's very important that you see this just as the way that you would see a young manager that wants to have a management training, that she wants then just a little bit of your support, because the potential afterwards is really big. So the effort is probably even smaller than sending a young 25-year-old enthusiastic manager on a training.
That could also play an issue. The generations at work. How does a younger generation understand this kind of transitions in a older generation?
Yeah. The generations. Yes. I also refer sometimes to generation. In fact, the generations Z.
Mm-hmm.
They believe women lead, and women are the leaders, and that's why sometimes you see more mental issues with young men. But they are really coming to the workplace, and they, if not, women are a little bit even considered higher, because they have higher education. At school, they were scoring better. There are many reasons that young boys feel that they are a little bit disadvantaged in that generation. But then they arrive in the office with that mentality, I'm great, I'm better than men, where you meet people of my generation or older that don't have that mentality, and of course that creates a conflict. That of course, if you say we will never have free tampons on the office, and then of course that creates a certain conflict, and that's a generational conflict that is needed. Every younger generation has changed the norms. That's the task of every young generation. We did that because when I arrived at work, I adapted and was wearing the tie, but my generation also thought, yes, a tie, is that now necessary? So we changed the norm, and that's the task that every young generation needs to have, to change the norm. And of course, changing the norm, that means that you have to show taboo behavior, because taboos are existing to keep norms in the place. So your behavior becomes taboo as soon as you start changing the norm. That's normal. That's what's happening. Younger generations do. My advice to managers is, as soon as you know that young generations have this task to change the norms, realize that there is also somebody else that can change the norm. And that's the charismatic leader. For charismatic leaders, it is accepted that they change the norms. So you need those two in a company to change norms and to avoid taboos.
Let's make that happen then. Huh? That's. I still had one question about the difference, because you are completely into the topic of menopause. But what is the difference between stress and menopause? How do I understand when I'm stressed, or that it has to do with menopausal transition?
Yes, now you're talking about the biological difference between stress linked with menopause and stress in general. There's not one answer. That stress is a little bit too complex. But
Yes.
in the book I also refer to anxiety, and I put anxiety in the middle because anxiety is something that a woman in menopause can perhaps not diagnose herself immediately, but as soon as she knows that it might be linked to menopause, she can sooner place it. Mm-hmm. And of course, at work, what you see is that anxiety, if you have it already a little bit due to menopause within you, if at the same time you face microaggressions at work, or if you see that nobody knows what's going on with menopause, that will increase the anxiety and the stress linked with anxiety. And therefore, it's very, very important that also managers and colleagues don't accept those small microaggressions. And small microaggressions can be very easy. Is it perhaps your hormones? So those are comments that women have to face all the time, even if they don't have menopausal symptoms and they just feel warm or the heat is in the room a little bit too high. But those microaggressions, and especially microaggressions against aging, happen in the office, and because we are all aging, also towards men. It's all increasing anxiety, and anxiety is probably in menopause the biggest cause of stress, next to not knowing what's happening to your body. And that's a big difference. And then of course you have the stress in life of having to do too much, and that's of course also playing a role. But that's the difficulty in midlife. We are at the age between the age of 40 and 50. Your husband is in a midlife. That can stress you out. And suddenly he wants to buy that sports car, he wants to buy that expensive bike. Then your children are in puberty, which also increases stress. You might be facing hormonal changes. And at work, you know that it's a very crucial period to make your last few steps. At the same time, and sometimes people underestimate that, there's care for the elderly parents that sometimes jumps in. And sometimes also big financial challenges because students are also costing you quite some money. So yes, it's a very stressful life period also.
Intense, but you cannot really say this is different where you could see you go either to the direction of menopause or to the direction of stress. It's all.
No.
Yeah, I was just wondering.
Yes. Biologically, yes, you can see that the estrogen lowering, and of course that influences the hormones and the stress levels in the traditional stress levels. And you can also say even the oxidative stress. Yes, there is a physiological aspect around it. But if you don't consider that, there's not really one point that you can pinpoint. This is stress caused by work or husband or something, and this is caused by.
It's just adding on the pot of stress, which is already there cooking on the fire.
Yeah, but the big advantage that we have is that most of the people go through it. So most of the people know it. Most of the people have to go through it. So if we just talk a little bit more around it, then it will also be easier to go through it. And we also have to talk around it in the context of work, because many books are already written around menopause.
Yes.
But it's always sending a little bit the women to home to solve it herself. It's always a little bit self-help books. And in my opinion, there are too many self-help books out there. But with the book, we wanted to focus on the system that the women doesn't find a place in. Is there a place for our biology the workplace? And that's an important question, because that's where probably also a big solution can be found.
Absolutely. And what is the employer? What is he losing when he ignores this?
Yes, the employers, they lose mainly on the level of money, on the level of absenteeism, but we see also a big impact on work fun. Perhaps that's good to know that policies or implementation of workshops. Best studies show 50% of the people say that they have now more fun at work after such a workshop.
Then work goes easier when there's more fun?
Yes, and you understand each other better. You can perhaps now, if there is understanding, you can also put a joke out. I sometimes have the discussion, can you joke around menopause? If you have a very clear intention of people where they want to support you during a certain period and the support is very clear, or the manager that clearly has an intention to improve well-being at work, then sometimes a small remark will not harm because your intention is very clear, but your intention that you are working on well-being within your team has to be clear from the actions that you take. People judge you on your actions, not on the intention that you have in your mind. So if you have very clear actions to improve well-being, then of course there can be some fun around menopause and any other thing, but it has to be very clear that actions towards well-being are also managed.
Yeah, I see well-being very often mentioned on scorecards in companies. Also nicely to be ticked off. But then that's why you put the emphasis quite a bit on the action side, because it remains a nice phrases on the scorecard. But in reality, the actions to implement it or to really to do something with it aren't there, because priorities at this stage are going into other directions.
Yes, indeed. Yeah, it cannot just be your intention because nobody sees your intention. You have to act. And if your actions are clear and everybody understands that your actions are towards the benefit of people, for the well-being of people, then they also understand that you can make also sometimes a joke around it.
And what is
I'm not promoting jokes, by the way. But, it's more accepted in that way.
And what is the next action from you and Anneke?
Of course, now, these days, we are a little bit overwhelmed by what's happening with the book.
How do you manage your stress?
To be honest, after we won the prize, it was immediate stress because we were out of stock. At least you have this central depot of books in the Netherlands where all the books are stored. So that was completely out of stock. So on Thursday evening, we won the prize, and Anneke was already driving the next day towards the depot to put more books. So yes, it's a little bit stressful to get more books into the market, which is of course a luxury aspect of what we are facing. And of course also the demands for workshops is growing, but that was already growing before.
And we get a book in English?
Yes, that's of course the question that we've received also quite often. Also, because I'm from Belgium, there's also a French question within it. Yes, we are now looking into a translation into English, but I also want to adapt them a little bit towards the English, the UK market. And because the book contains a lot of data, a lot of numbers, and the UK market is also then an interesting market because they have a lot of numbers. Yes, English translation is also coming up. We are working on it. We are in fact looking also towards a publisher and perhaps also to a first company that wants to buy already 100 copies, for example, because that we were having difficulties to find a publisher for this book, right? Because it was such a niche topic according to many publishers. But that means also that we finance everything ourselves.
There is more visibility in general, not only because we're talking about it today, about the topic of menopause, maybe because there are more women reaching that age. With what you say about companies, that must be more feasible as ever to
Yeah, I also trust in it. If you would say, towards me, is it a good investment? I would say, yes, I find it a good investment.
In the UK, I also noticed that when I was investigating menopause and see the differences in the European countries. In my research, a lot of UK specialists talking about it. Guidelines are very accurate, very new. How does that come? Do you know that?
Yes, in fact, the UK had the big advantage of having some very famous people advocating more on the topic of menopause. Mm-hmm. And secondly, and we cannot underestimate, some of the women went to court against their employer. And the first court case is now, I think, 10 years ago. And since, women have been going to court much more often. You can see that in the graphs with the court cases where menopause was a topic. We are now above 500 cases every year already.
In the UK?
In the UK. So big TV personalities have jumped on the topic, and also the court cases, because negative publicity for companies is also something that they fear a lot. I don't see that happening immediately in many other countries, but it's certainly one of those engines behind the menopause revolution in the UK.
And what was the claim from the women against the company?
All those women have gone to court based on 3 laws. It's the law on handicap. You cannot disadvantage people with a handicap. You cannot do age discrimination, and you cannot do gender discrimination. And those 3 laws combined give women the right to go into court for several reasons. It can be that they missed a salary increase because of menopause. It can be that they were disadvantaged towards a man with the same qualifications. So they use these 3 laws to go into court, and very often they win also. And of course, the menopause revolution has forced companies to act on policies, for example. And of course, then you also see that there is now labels and menopause-friendly workplace that are given to companies. So it's also a little commercialized already. It's not a disadvantage. It's even a good thing, I believe. It's not only more support, you also see that it becomes leverage for companies to attract women also, or to be a more attractive employer. So in their employee branding, it's also very important.
That's a nice evolution of this increase of visibility.
Yes, it certainly is. Yes. And the only thing that I don't want it to become perhaps always that big, but sometimes it's needed. We also have to take into account that we don't stigmatize women too much, because of it's not only menopause, the transition that we go through many more transitions. And I do believe that if we have such a menopause revolution also at work, that this is one of those domino blocks, so that if you give it a push, all the other will also fall. So on the level of inclusion, that's something that I believe in. If we can manage also menopause, then we can also manage much easier other aspects of inclusion also. That's why the jury, that was in fact one of the nicest things, the jury of the Management Book of the Year, and they mentioned this book puts inclusion on another level. And I was like, oh, that's really what I wanted to do.
So that's the impact you wanted to create.
Yes. Yeah, but if we talk about inclusion and diversity, we also always talk about those minorities, while women are a majority that doesn't feel included.
Yeah, let that drop down.
Yeah. But and we know that in companies like pharma companies, we know that women decide on 80% of the family budget spendings. Women are higher educated than men already in the Netherlands and Belgium for more than 25 years. And we know that there's a huge potential, and it's for every company the most important target group. And still they face simple taboos like menopause.
So for all those companies, next step, buy your book. Oh,
yes,
not yet.
Of course. Yes.
Not yet, because it's not yet in English. But for all those companies.
But we are working on the English version, and I'll give you a heads up when it's.
Yes. Do so. No, there are many companies which can make improvements there. So that's absolutely true. And I think you already expressed what they can do, and now they also know to find you.
The book is, of course, much more details on what they can do, and also on the biological aspect.
It's rich, and it starts with the financials, which I think that's very important for companies to make these connections between what is happening and what then the impact is on the company level. The output.
Yes. I would like to emphasize that it's very important to see the potential as you see it in research, but you also have to be convinced of that potential, that it is already within your team. And then every form of support becomes, in fact, an empowerment. That's very important.
But you say every form, then I don't understand exactly what you mean with that.
As soon as you see the potential, then every issue that appears that the woman would need support is not a support. It's empowering to get to that potential. It's helping the company to gain more leadership skills, better leadership skills, more competitive leadership skills. And if you see it like that, that's where we want to arrive, that we see the full potential of every employer.
That's the best way to phrase it, also to be interested for employers to be open to organize workshops, lectures, and activities around this topic at the workforce.
Yes, certainly. Yeah, but that will happen anyhow. I'm so convinced that many more companies will also put this topic on the agenda, and that within this and 10 years, many more women will also be earlier diagnosed with menopause than it is today.
And how is your workshops called? How are they called? How are they framed? What do you do there?
The workshops that we give for leaders are also framed in the same title as the book, and that's then Silenteeism, and that also makes sense as it's a management book. We give all the hints, tips, and tricks, and we do the exercises that are needed to have a good, active listening conversation. Most of the managers are already enthusiastic about the biological part to understand that more, and then of course it's so much easier afterwards to have a conversation. It is one of those nice things after a menopause workshop that people start talking it much more on the workplace, and therefore it's already taboo breaking that managers would follow a small workshop on menopause. So if you see it as an organizational issue, not as a women issue, then the solutions that you put in place should work for many women. Yeah,
that's also true. I was just thinking, it's totally come up in my mind now. You have the best place to work. Now we're coming best menopause place to work.
Yeah.
Maybe that could be the future.
Yes, indeed. Yes.
I want to close with one question about you. Then the podcast is about stress and looking for resilience. So how do you manage this? Yeah, it's nicely stressful, so it's positive stress, but still stress. How do you manage that?
If I'm really stressed, you will like to hear that. But then I have the possibility to find quick relief in a breathing exercise. But then it's like a little bit of mindfulness exercise where I focus on breathing, for example. And my favorite way, that's what I will do immediately after this call, not that this call was stressful, but the sun is out and it's still nice outside, then I go for a run. And I have to admit that I have been a very heavy runner. And I also underestimated sometimes what running competitively does on a body, because that also causes stress. But now I can already enjoy a slow run. It took me years to be convinced that slow running is also good for your body. But now I can do a slow run, and I'm planning to do in this nice weather outside a slow run. And running without music, just within the nature, is for me the biggest addictive stress reliever.
Yeah, you're not the only one mentioning that. And if you're into the slow running, then I don't know if maybe you do it already, huh? But breathe, mouth closed, and breathe only.
As much as possible. I try as much as possible to do slow running. Yeah.
If you're in the slow running, then try to keep your mouth closed and breathe only through your nose, so that you really breathe low. Yes. That makes you feel more connected. But you can only do that when you do slow running.
Yes.
It makes the whole movement, the practice, way more enjoyable.
Yes, yeah. But when I do slow running, I also breathe through my nose. I always breathe through my nose, almost always. But indeed, yes. But when I was younger, I was at the age of 12, I was doing athleticism, and we had to run a lot. And indeed, we had to talk during running, during the warming up, and breathe through the nose. That was always very important. And as long as you were able to breathe through the nose and to talk, then that means that your heart rate is not going up.
Yep.
And that you're doing good, and that the warming up is in a good stage. Yes. Yeah.
Then I will not leave you any longer inside, Filip, because I agree with you. Going outside is also one of my favorite tools to just be outside in the nature. That calms down everything, which is also proven and published. Yeah. Thank you very much for sharing all your insights.
Yeah, thank you for inviting me.
About the book, that I could talk to you so soon after you became a winner.
You're the first podcast after the.
Yeah, it's a topic. I've worked also in women's health for a long period, and when I was working on menopause, that was when I was 20, in my 20s, 25. I totally took it very light, that whole topic. Now I am on the other side of the table, and I decided to talk more about it, because that gives me relief. It's also see where there is a lot of problems and issues, and I would like to contribute to getting that taboo of the word menopause by showing how you can best navigate through this period. So I let also go a bit of my own shame, a bit of my, oh no, I will not have that. It's just accepting whatever comes and is, and you cannot do nothing about what is happening. It's about how you deal with it and how you prepare. And that's what I like that I could talk to you today about this topic, which is highly relevant. So thank you for sharing all your knowledge.
You're very welcome. Yes, thank you.